Mason himself knew of Davis's previous illness. But then the lieutenant presented his own assumption as if it were fact. Therefore, he said, he had a right to expect from my commander a care similar to that by which he attempted to account for not noticing the absence of Lieutenant Izzard from the Reveille roll call of the same morning. Davis completely ignored Izzard's own testimony that Mason knew he had been on sick report for several days, which Davis had not, and that he had reported to Mason first before being specifically told that he could stay in his tent at Reveille. Davis never made any such request of his commander, and now in his summation again took refuge in his mistaken understanding of regulations. If he knew of his mistake, he glossed over it. But then Davis steered back onto the path of accuracy and demonstrated with some effect what appeared to be a case of Mason singling out him alone for the required attendance at Reveille, and making some capital out of Mason's inability to recall the specific dates of the numerous occasions on which he charged Davis with missing roll call. Unfortunately, having got into an area with firmer ground under him, Davis abruptly leaped off into the absurd, devoting the greatest portion of his defense to the issue of the word, After accusing Mason of seizing on an isolated, meager interjection and magnifying it into an importance worthy of the most significant word in the English language, Davis proceeded to do exactly the same thing, devoting more time to it than to any other point in his defense. He argued about tone and manner and how they signify the meaning of words such as, He tried to profit from Mason's uncertainty as to precisely at what point in the affair Davis had uttered the offending syllable. Davis even implied that he ought to be commended for his forbearance in meeting Mason's ire with only a and silence, despite his own earlier testimony that he believed such a bearing was the best way to provoke the Major. As for staring Mason in the eye when the Major became aroused, then turning on his heel abruptly, Davis did not deny it, but he denied that it was censurable. Is it part of the character of a soldier to humble himself beneath the haughty tone, or quail before the angry eye of any man? He asked. Of course, it was just that tone and that eye that Davis had turned on his superior. Finally, Davis attacked the accusation that Mason had to order him 3 times to go to his tent under arrest, and here he returned again to sounder logic on a worthwhile point, and with restraint he refrained from imputing to Mason any ungentlemanly motives in bringing charges against him. Mason's ire rather grew out of his being a man biased by strong feelings. His irritation committed him to the course he has taken against me, said Davis. Had my self-respect allowed me to make to him those explanations which through witnesses I have made to the court, said the defendant, he believed that Mason's course would have been a different one. Even here, as he concluded by denying that Mason had malign intentions, Davis revealed something about himself. He could have averted all this, he said, if he had made explanations to Mason. Self-respect would not allow him to do so. Indeed, it would not, though what Davis saw in himself as self-respect looked more like pride, an excessive pride that would not admit error, that would not explain when questioned, and that did not apologize. Davis preferred to go through 8 days of court-martial, weeks of arrest beforehand, a tense examination and cross-examination, and a statement of facts and opinions almost certain to poison any future relations with his commander, rather than explain his behavior on the spot at the time of the incident. And through the whole court-martial, Davis never once even hinted at apology for his actions. Not once did he admit any poor judgment or wrongdoing on that ill-starred Christmas Eve. Already the mold of the man was set. While he did not seek confrontation, he would not step aside to avoid it, regarding personal self-respect, pride, as paramount to whatever problems that confrontation might yield, and no point was too small or insignificant if Davis felt that it touched on his honor or conduct, even the meaning of the word, In almost every other context, friends and family found him a warm, witty, even charming companion during his army days. But when a word or an action appeared to reflect criticism of any kind on him, his mind took on a single purpose, to prove himself right, completely right, even if in his conviction of righteousness he overlooked, discounted, or misstated to his purpose views and evidence to the contrary. It was not dishonesty so much as it was a blindness to his own fallibility. Davis often argued in future years that he was the first to admit error, yet such admissions would be few, and he made none now. Unshakably convinced of the correctness of his conduct, his mind simply could not countenance the possibility that other points of view on an issue might be valid. The court-martial proved to be not quite as charitable to Davis as he was to himself. The courtroom was cleared while Miles read to the members all of the past day's proceedings. There followed a mature deliberation over the case. Finally, they called Davis and Mason back before them, and General Arbuckle, president of the court, read the verdict. In reviewing the specification of the charge against him, that he had acted as Mason charged on December 24, 1834, the court removed the words, "highly disrespectful, insubordinate, and contemptuous conduct," where they appeared, and found him guilty of all the actions that Mason charged. However, they attached no criminality to those actions, as indeed there was none in a military sense, and therefore found him not guilty of the actual charge of conduct subversive of good order and military discipline. The court, therefore, acquitted him. Though he never commented upon it, Davis cannot have been entirely pleased with the verdict, for it was equivocal at best. His acquittal on the greater charge removed any stigma of criminality, yet the verdict on the specification made it very clear that the members of the court did not agree with Lieutenant Davis that his conduct on Christmas Eve had been beyond reproach. Surely that stung his tender pride as it never had been hurt before. Indeed, it may have stung so much that it prompted the sort of response that only hurt pride can elicit. 11 days after the verdict, he wrote his resignation and gave it to General Arbuckle. Davis may have been considering resigning anyhow as his marriage to Sarah Taylor approached. It cannot have matured into a fixed idea by this time, though, or Zachary Taylor would not have continued to object to the wedding, his sole objection having been that he did not want his daughter marrying into the Army. Had Davis announced an intention to resign, then all grounds for Taylor's refusal to endorse the marriage should have disappeared. Certainly the lieutenant's resignation did come within a few months of his wedding vows, yet nothing in either his surviving correspondence with family in Mississippi or his heartfelt December letter to Sarah a few days before his arrest even hinted at an intent to leave the Army at this time, nor did he have an immediate occupation to replace the military. In later years, Davis apparently told family members that he resigned to get married, but the plea does not ring true.